One of the things I learned as a police officer pretty quick in my career is that when you have the opportunity to listen to a story, there's a lot of transformation in that. And you can imagine that a lot of the men that we're talking about tonight, because we are talking about a lot of men that are using, whether it's pornography or buying women, I had the opportunity to meet these men face to face. And I always had a soft spot for women. So I would always lean towards, being that relational person where I could develop a relationship with that woman, to hear her story. And in essence, as she shared that story, it would break a piece of my heart. And in the breaking of my heart, when I would meet these men to arrest them, I allowed my self-righteousness to get into full effect, and I would treat them a lot differently than I would treat these women. And there's a lot of danger in that, because there's a weekend where on a Friday night I arrested a man for raping his wife and abusing her over the course of that week, to the point where she was brought to the hospital. And the next day I had a friend confess to me that he's been using prostitution for years. And I had two different responses in that moment. The night before, if I had told you stories of what I did to that man and how I shamed him and guilted him, and I'm assuming that a lot of you probably would have agreed with me in those moments, my reaction to my friend when he confessed to me was completely different. My reaction was out of love and not out of condemnation. As Katerina was sharing her story, it's easy for us to track along the brokenness of humanity. That weekend in my policing career allowed me to start listening to men tell their stories. And it's difficult when there's a man who is used to being disrespected or shamed or guilted, and you ask him, hey, what's your life all about? What happened to you? And not every man would open up and tell me stories about who they were, but the ones that did had very similar stories, believe it or not, to Katerina, which made it very difficult for me to accept them for who they were. I'm telling you this because, men, we represent the demand. We live in a culture where our culture commodifies women. We live in a culture where pornography is so large that the economies of scale are so in favor of people like Fabian Thyman, who make $14 billion a year for running the world's largest pornography sites. We learn that we can get any woman we want, that we can look at any woman and window shop as if that's okay. We can go to strip clubs the night before we get married because it's the last expression of freedom. And we don't challenge these things. We don't challenge those locker room conversations when men are just disrespecting women openly, when we talk about their physical features, as if we have some kind of claim to them. We represent the demand when we just passively let these conversations happen, when we passively allow other friends that we know, colleagues, whether they're looking at the Sunshine Girl at the back page of the Toronto Sun and they're commenting on it, or they're doing something further. But we also represent the solution. And that's what I want to talk to you tonight about, because it's exciting for me to think that each and every one of you here tonight can do something very practical, and it can start now. We're all called to this battle. And if you look around the room, and as the Defend Dignity team has gone across the country, we can tell you that men have been the minority in the majority of our forums. And it kind of sucks for me because I like talking to men, and when I look around at all the women, I'm just reminded that this is not just a woman's issue, but this is a human issue. And because it's a human issue, it means that it's a man's issue just as much as our counterparts. So men, if you can just stand up so I can see each and every one of you tonight. And if you're not a man and you consider yourself a young boy, I'd encourage you to stand up as well. Because one day, young men, you will be men. But as you look around the room, there's strength in unity. Now, when each and every one of you were to walk away from tonight and know that you have a battle to fight within this injustice, and it can start with the next conversation you have with another man. It could start tomorrow when you're at church and you train your eyes not to look at a woman's body. And then you carry that on through the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to Friday, you can stand up for women where the battles are so secret that you will make dramatic impacts. Because my friends, and I've had many friends confess to me that they've slept with prostitutes. I am convinced that if I had the courage to intervene in their life and just check in with them, things could have been different. If I challenged my buddies that would go to strip clubs and I wouldn't join them because I thought that there's no way I want that a part of my life, and if I actually challenged them, I could have maybe changed a piece of their life. So what you need to remember, men, because you have a role to play, whether you want it or not. You're a part of culture, and if we let culture dominate, then it's going to dominate your perspectives on women. In Romans 12:2, God calls us to just renew our minds. And when we renew our minds, we can change our perspective on women. We can change our attitudes that we hold about women and prostitutes and anything in between. And in those moments, we get to make up our minds. And we can make up our minds and decide what kind of men we want to be. And if you want to be a man of courage and a man of strength, then you're not going to be alone. Because there's men like me, there's men like you, there's men across this country that want to do something to fight this evil. Because every generation has an evil that needs to be confronted. And this evil of human trafficking and prostitution and pornography is the battle that we need to fight. To fight this battle, we need to start it on our knees. Every time that you start your battle on your knees, I guarantee you will win every time. And ask God to show you which man in your life you need to speak to. Because you'll stand tallest when you're on your knees. And in Micah 6:8, we read that to act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly is what God calls us to do. And when we do that, acting justly, we realize that to stand up for what is right is honorable. And we know that. But before we can do that, we need to figure out who we are as men in the roles that God has given us. We need to confront the evil inside of us, because I know, like myself, that there's things in our lives that we have not paid enough attention to. We need to garnish our sexuality, because when we do that, we can realize that we are sinners, and we can work from that point to only get better. When we love mercy, we have the opportunity to be compassionate, both to those that are oppressed and to the oppressor. Because it's a very fine balance when it comes to working with women in this role. And not all of you will have that opportunity to go and rescue a woman or to sit down and listen to her story, but you have an opportunity to speak to men. And to walk humbly, given that opportunity just to tune into what God is asking you to do in the moments, in the lives that you get to influence, whether it's at work or on a sport field or in a social club, you'll be able to speak into people's lives, and you can prevent them. I am a firm believer, you can prevent them from making mistakes that I've made, that you've made. And we can stand beside each other and know that this is our voice that we're contributing on behalf of women across this country and here in Brampton. Thank you very much.